Welcome, welcome, Jacob.
It is amazing to be here, as always.
Well, it's awesome to have you. So, we have the shape of what the Democratic Army looks like going into the case for flipping the House, right?
Yeah.
Going into the 2026 midterm elections.
Yeah. I mean, we're a little more than halfway through primary season, which sounds crazy because it feels like it's been about a decade since we
Yeah.
started these races back in Texas all the way in March. It has been over 3 months since the primaries kicked off. And when we look at the battlefield for the House map, we've got nominees in probably about half or a little bit more of the most competitive districts. So the Democratic slate is certainly starting to take shape in the center of the battleground, and of course, we've also got results in safer seats, but new members that are going to play a big role in what a Democratic majority might look like next year.
First, can we do a minute on the New York primaries? Because the road to the House runs through New York, and we saw a surprising move. So, can you talk us through what happened in New York?
Yeah, well, I think this is a really great kind of microcosm of a larger tension that we're seeing within the Democratic Party right now when it comes to these House races, because you've got two different universes. You've got the universe of safe seats, where we saw the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, the Mamdani-backed candidates really show out last night. You saw two incumbents go down to DSA-backed challengers. Dan Goldman and Adriano Espaillat both lost to Mamdani-endorsed candidates. Claire Valdez also won in the open 7th district. So
So
in
Claire
these
Valdez that is the seat that was occupied by Nina Velasquez.
Yeah, so Nydia Velasquez was
Nydia
the
Velasquez.
the the longtime member there, a trailblazer. This is one of the most democratic seats in the country. It's what people call the commie corridor,
Yeah.
this area where Mamdani has been so successful. And so on the one hand, you've got Democrats in New York in these safe blue seats nominating the more progressive candidates. But if you look at the competitive general election races, it's a pretty different story. So if you go up just a little bit north to the Hudson Valley, New York 17, Kate Conley, who's a special forces veteran, former Biden administration official, very kind of no nonsense.
And
Um,
that's the seat that's occupied by Mike Lawler.
Mike Lawler, yes. And he is one of the most vulnerable Republicans right now. And there was a progressive candidate in that race, Effie Phillips Staley, who was backed by Jamal Bowman, some other progressive organizations there. She came in third. So in that
Right.
district, the Democrats nominated somebody who came from a more moderate, less ideological, military focused background.
So swing district, you
Yeah.
have a centrist, a sort of mini Mikey Sherrill.
Yes, similar vein to Mikey Sherrill, and in fact, there's a whole group of women running in highly competitive House districts who have military backgrounds that are explicitly channeling the energy that Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger and Alyssa
Right.
Slotkin and some others brought to their races back in 2018.
In a dark blue district, you have candidates who are the more lefty part of the spectrum, but in a swingy district, you have a more of a centrist.
Yes, I think that is currently fair to say. We aren't seeing Democrats in these toss-up, highly competitive districts nominate DSA members, nominate kind of the most progressive options there. Yeah, so far, again, we still have primaries to go, but by and large, in the majority makers, we're seeing a far more conventional playbook in terms of who is winning these primaries.
And so we will go from 2 DSA members in the House to 4, which is double, but still not quite a caucus.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that it's undeniable that over the past decade, the left wing of the Democratic Party is on the ascendancy within the caucus. And if Democrats take back the majority, unless they do it by kind of a smashing margin, it's very possible that the squad or whatever kind of successor to the squad that we're going to see come 2027 will play a very important role in the coalition management that Hakeem Jeffries is going to have to do as a potential speaker.
And one of the things that I think is important about this, about New York, the New York primaries, is that both the person who wants to be leader of the Senate and the person who wants to be the Speaker of the House are both from New York.
Yeah.
And they both endorsed candidates who lost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if Schumer waded into any of these House primaries, but Hakeem Jeffries backed his incumbents, and I think that that is something that he's always going to do, and this is a burgeoning headache for him. It remains to be
Yes.
seen how he manages this wing of his conference. I think Nancy Pelosi was very skilled at bringing AOC and Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley and Rashida Tlaib into the fold as much as she could when those four came into Congress in 2018 during that Democratic majority. This is going to be a test for Jeffries. Can he similarly manage that internal caucus differences if he gets to be Speaker?
And AOC has also, I think she and certainly Ariana Presley are have very much sort of pivoted to be just sort of good members of the House who have not, I mean, they very much work within the system and not outside of it.
Yeah, I think that AOC both, and I think it's telling that both of them have the clearest higher ambitions. Both
Hmm.
of them are potential Senate candidates. Both of them,
For sure.
are not going to be House members forever in a way that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib have not expressed nearly as much kind of interest about running for
They
statewide or
don't have the
national
path
office.
either.
Um, I think that AOC is an incredibly savvy politician. I think that she's been open about how, she's not going to be in the House forever. I think that she is one of the few members who's really good at leveraging her committee assignments to generate those kind of viral moments that help her both fundraise and raise her profile as a substantive legislator. I think she's aware of her weaknesses as well as she is her strengths. And whatever she decides to do in 2028, whether that's run for Senate or run for president, I think she is going to be a threat to win the nomination and a threat to win overall. People underestimate her at their own risk.
So let's go through this primary calendar here for a
No.
minute. And I do think just one last thing on this. It does seem like this was a good night for the mayor.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was certainly the best night for him politically since he won election over Andrew Cuomo. Maybe not the best night for him this month, though, given the Knicks championship win. But restricting us to politics, yeah. I mean, this was, to call it a shot across the bow is underselling it. I mean, he toppled two incumbent
Okay.
members of Congress. This was a big deal for him.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the House for where we are now. Talk me through sort of the House members who lost their seats or where they affect what it looks like for winning the House. When we look at the March, May, and June primaries so far.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a couple of members lose their seats in primaries so far. Largely, redistricting is the driving factor there.
Right.
When you look at some of the members who lost in Texas, like Al Green or Dan Crenshaw, those are redistricting considerations.
And Green was very old, and he's been replaced by someone who was in his 30s.
Yes, yes. So there was a real generational contrast there. I think that as we are looking forward to the upcoming primaries, that's one axis that I think is a potential to see some more losses. Thinking about a guy like John Larson in Connecticut, who is just kind of a rank and file Democrat, good on Social Security, isn't controversial, but he's got a challenger who's running on a generational platform, Luke Bronin, the
Right.
former mayor of Hartford. You've got next week, probably the biggest primary next week in Colorado's first district, which is Denver, Diana DeGette, who's quietly been one of the longest serving members of the Democratic caucus at this point, been in Congress since the 90s. She got elected young, so she's not, kind of aging out in her 70s or 80s, but she's got a challenge from a progressive candidate who is significantly younger than she is, making both an ideological and a generational contrast. And so, you've got a number of these races. And in Florida, we're going to see some generational fights. Can Debbie Wasserman Schultz hold on to her spot in Congress?
I need you to talk about Debbie Wasserman Schultz because this is an insane primary.
Yeah. And
Explain what's going on here. Because I let you explain this because it's
yeah.
so bad. Yeah, go.
So essentially, what happened is that Florida Republicans a couple of weeks ago redrew their congressional map,
After
and
the Supreme Court basically killed the Voting Rights Act.
well, they actually did it before, kind of in anticipation
Right.
of this happening, and what they did in South Florida was they took what was four solid Democratic seats and reshaped them to be two solid Democratic seats and two highly competitive districts.
Right.
And one of those seats was Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district that used to be solidly Democratic. And it
And
got kind of,
also a majority minority seat.
well, not her current district,
Right. But
but
okay, yeah, go on.
what they did to her district, essentially, she had no. They dispersed her constituents to a bunch of different places, and she had a couple of options. Her two big options were she could run in this new kind of coastal district that is going to be highly competitive, that Jared Moskowitz is going to run in, or she could jump to try and run in the vacant seat that was held by Sheila Sherfos McCormick
Right.
before she resigned under the ethics investigation. And that district is historically a majority black seat, West Palm Beach, Broward County, and has been held by a black Democrat for a very long time. Alcee Hastings was there for a long time before Sherfos McCormick. And that's caused a lot of consternation because Wasserman Schultz represents, the overlap is fairly tiny. She is, of course, a white woman. She's represented a different part of the state. She's never really represented this area. And she's now coming in to run in this safe seat as opposed to running in one of the more competitive districts that she also had the option to. But nobody can decide who to consolidate behind in terms of the other candidates. So there's a lot of frustration among black Democratic leaders down in South Florida that
And
she's doing this.
and Sheila Sherfullis McCormick is actually gonna run too.
She is running again, alleged. I mean, in name, I don't know,
Yeah.
kind of. She's under federal indictment, right? I'm not sure that she's got the resources to run, but she's in the race. Elijah Manley is in the race. He's a young guy who was running against Sherfullis McCormick before she dropped out or before she resigned. You've got Dale Holness, who's a former Broward County commissioner who lost to Sherfullis McCormick back in 2020. You've got Uncle Luke from Two Live Crew, the rapper,
Oh, cool.
who he's also running there. He ran for mayor a couple of years ago, so he's been involved in local politics. It's a real mess. I think right now, Wasserman Schultz is probably the favorite because she only needs to win more than anybody else. She doesn't need to win a majority. It's a plurality state. But it's really uncomfortable, and Jeffries notably has not endorsed her. He's held off on that, and he always endorses his incumbents. So that is a real sign of kind of the internal frustrations, even within the Democratic Party up on Capitol Hill, about what Wasserman Schultz is doing.
Do you think it's weird that Jeffries hasn't gotten involved here?
I mean, I don't think that I think that it indicates that there are very deep divisions within the Democratic caucus, and
Right.
I'm sure public and not so public concerns coming from the Congressional Black Caucus, of which Jeffries is a member, about what Wasserman Schultz is doing. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable for everyone. Florida Democrats are in a real bind here, and there are no easy answers for the party. And this is just like, it's a challenge that they're going to have to work through.
Florida strikes me as being in a pretty good spot for Democrats as much as it has been in the last couple years.
I mean, the bar is like
But talk
in
us
South
through
America here.
yeah, but talk us through the governor. I mean, the David Jolly looks like he certainly has closer to a shot than any Democrat has had statewide in Florida since Nikki.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Is that since 2018, Florida Democrats have absolutely gotten their butts handed to them up and down the ballot, every single race, in a major statewide election. And so, Yeah, I think that two things can be true. David Jolly and potentially Alex Vindman on the Senate side
I think
could
Vindman has less of a shot than Jolly.
could be, I think that they're going to be the most competitive Democrats since 2018. I'm not sure if that gets them in the vicinity of a victory. I think the state has just changed so much in terms of the population, who's moved in since DeSantis became governor, since the COVID pandemic, pushed people out of their home states into Florida. I think that even if we see kind of a reversion among Hispanic voters in South Florida to more of a 2020, 2018 kind of voting pattern, there are just fewer Democrats there and more Republicans there than there ever were before. And that's even before you kind of start to factor in Byron Donalds having 100-1 cash on hand advantage over David
So
Jolly right now.
talk us through sort of where you think there are opportunities in the Senate and the House from what's happened with these primaries for Democrats.
Yeah. Look, I think the Senate map is pretty clear. For Democrats to win back the majority, they have to win North Carolina. They have to hold both of their competitive holds, so Michigan and
Michigan.
Georgia. Michigan primary still up in the
Mm.
air, not for another month and a half.
Who is the best shot to hold Michigan?
If you go by the current polling, it would tell you that Haley Stevens polls better against Mike Rogers than either of her opponents, but we're talking about gradations of a couple of points
So
here.
it
And
doesn't, so you don't think there's a clear.
I am less convinced that there's a clear best general election candidate for Michigan. I know that there are other
Right.
opinions here in DC. There are Democrats who are still concerned that Abdul El-Sayed is a weaker general election candidate. I'm not so sure that's the case,
Yeah,
to
me
be
neither.
honest. I think that whoever is the Democrat is going to have a very narrow band of performance there.
Yeah.
Um,
So North
but
Carolina, Michigan, Georgia, tell me.
and then you got to contend with Maine. Maine should be the best pickup opportunity. It's not though. I think the Plattner factor of it all makes it just a little bit more complicated. Like
Yeah.
I think people who think that he's a shoo-in are wrong. People who think that he's a dead letter are wrong. I think that's a highly competitive race. Susan Collins could win, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no question that she
Ohio.
could win. Ohio and Alaska, I think, are the two kind of most critical states in this picture right now. You've got Sherrod Brown, you've got Mary Peltola. Both of them are running really strong campaigns, well funded.
I also think do not discount the Vivek of it all.
Yeah, I mean, he is struggling in the governor's race a little bit. I think he's got his own sort of unique challenges. He's got unlimited money that he can throw at those challenges. What we're going to see over the next couple of weeks is really interesting to me because the Vivek super PAC has gone up on TV with attack ads against Amy Acton, the Democrat in that gubernatorial race, hitting her over her time as the state health director during COVID. And this has been what we've been hearing from Republicans for months about Amy Acton is once we start hitting her on COVID, her numbers are going to tank. This race is going to be over. So I'm watching very closely to see if that happens because Vivek has spent $14 million of his own money already on positive advertising, and it hasn't moved him at all. So now we
Hmm.
have to see, does the negative move Acton? And if the negative doesn't move Acton, that race only gets more and more competitive as we get closer to election day
And
because
that
Republicans
serves
are running
Sherrod.
out of tools. Yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, if there's a rising tide lifts all boats here, and if Acton is performing well, I think it's reasonable to believe that Sherrod is performing well. I think both of them help each other out in that race.
Texas, Iowa.
Yeah, I'm a believer in Iowa above Texas right now. I think Texas, I remain a skeptic. It is a really big state. You just have to win over a lot of voters who have not cast ballots for Democrats in years past. And what we're starting to see in polling now is a bit of consolidation among Republicans for Ken
For Ken
Paxton.
Paxton.
There was a lot of polling that came out post primary during the Republican runoff that had Tallarico ahead. And the reason was not because he was getting 50%, but it was because Paxton was not winning over a certain subset of John Cornyn voters who were salty about how things were going in that primary. Now we're starting to see him claw back some of those voters. The question is, can he get all of them, or do some of them continue
Stay
to hold
home.
out and move over to Tallarico. I think this
Or
is going
stay
to be
home.
or stay home, exactly. I think this is going to be a close race, don't get me wrong, but I think that the challenges for Tallarico are more difficult than what Josh Turek faces in Iowa when it comes to Ashley Hinson. I think there's something in the water in Iowa. That state is looking so competitive, at least as competitive as 2018. You've got a Democrat who's leading the governor's race right now, and Rob Sand. And Turek, he just has to win over fewer voters to get to a majority than James Tallarico does by a factor of 10. I mean,
Yeah.
Iowa is a small state. Texas is a massive state, and that makes a big difference.
Tell me, is there anything we're sleeping on that we should be focused on?
You're sleeping on the new Inside Elections website, which is launching hopefully
Yes.
by the time that this podcast comes out. We've spent the last year working on this. It is great. It's going to be the one-stop shop for anyone interested in House races, Senate races, all of our ratings, all of the candidate finance information, biography, full picture of the map, deep dives on races. It's all going to be there. I'm so excited about it. And that's what everyone's sleeping on these days.
Well done, Jacob. Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, as always.